Okay, well, I think we're just a couple minutes after 7. So hello, and thank you for joining us this evening to discuss the Land Management Restoration Program for a portion of the Niagara River shoreline area known as Gonder's Flats. It's situated near Service Road 7, just near north of Town Line Road on the South Parkway within the town of Fort Erie. So I'm Steve Barnhart, Senior Director of Parks, Environment, and Culture. And I will be facilitating tonight's session and passing along your questions to our senior staff members from our parks team, who will be presenting the project to you and answering questions afterwards. So joining me this evening, our presenters, Ellen Savoya, Senior Manager of Environmental Planning, and Corey Brandt, Project Manager of Forest Health. Also behind the scenes is Chris Giles, who will be helping me with your comments as they come in. I would also like to extend a special welcome to our commissioners who are joining us this evening, Commissioner Coveney, Commissioner Salsi, and Commissioner Redicott, who are listening in. And also a special welcome to our CEO, David Adames, who's listening in. Just before we get started, I'd like to go over a few of the housekeeping items for this evening to ensure that the session flows as smoothly as we can. And we certainly want to be able to answer your questions as efficiently as possible. So tonight, Ellen and Corey will be leading you through a PowerPoint presentation that summarizes the restoration program for Gonder's Flats, as well as describing the proposed next phase of the project. So we're encouraging you to submit your questions whenever you wish, and we'll provide time at the end of the session to answer all questions. So at the conclusion of the presentation, which is approximately 25 minutes, we'll have time for the formal question and answer period. So if you wish to submit a question, please do so through the Q&A button. So you'll see that located at the bottom of the Zoom window. And we'll be monitoring this area and passing along the questions to either Corey or Ellen as they, in order that they come in. In addition, following the session, you'll be emailed a survey link to provide an opportunity for feedback on the future direction of the project. So for those of you who have joined us without registered email, the link will be posted on our project website for you to participate in at your leisure. And in addition, for anybody who is not able to attend this evening, all the materials presented tonight, including a recording of the session, will be available on the project website. And if you haven't been there, it's niagaraparks.com/Gonder's Flats. So that, along with the survey link, will be available. The recording of the presentation will be live at the end of the week, and certainly anybody who hasn't been able to attend, or if you know of anybody who wanted to attend, please encourage them to join view the webpage and view the recording of tonight's session. We're going to leave the comment period open until January the 4th, and at that time we'll be able to post a summary of the survey results on the project webpage. So before we begin the formal presentation, I would just like to provide a land acknowledgement. We gratefully acknowledge that we are on lands that have been inhabited by Indigenous people for millennia. As Canadians, we're thankful for the opportunity to live, work, and play here on lands that are protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. We thank all those who have served and continue to serve as stewards of this special place. Recognizing the important contributions of Indigenous peoples is consistent with our commitment to making the promise of truth and reconciliation real in our communities. So I would now like to pass this presentation over to Ellen Savoya, who will begin taking us through. Go ahead, Ellen.
Thank you, Steve. Hello and welcome. I will be providing an overview of Niagara Parks, our environmental stewardship responsibilities, the goals and long-term plans of Niagara Parks, and then Corey will be providing more details on the restoration of Gonder's Flats, the overall project, and the upcoming phases that we're planning. So Niagara Parks mandate is preserving and promoting the natural and cultural heritage along the Niagara River corridor. This vision was established, or the mandate and a vision to be a source of national pride and identity and one of the most spectacular parks in the world, and an innovative example of sustainability, was established in our 10-year strategic plan, so that our vision there would be hopes that we would achieve these by 2028. As a self-financed agency of the Ministry of Heritage, Sport, Tourism, and Culture Industries, Niagara Parks is also committed to delivering commercial products in a way that ensures benefits for all, including the natural environment. Next slide, please. So Niagara Parks, for those who may not be aware, are stewards of the entire Niagara River corridor. This is the lands that stretch from Niagara on the Lake right to Fort Erie and Lake Erie. The stewardship has been a foundational part of Niagara Parks since the beginning, and it endures to this day. We strive to be an innovative example of sustainability, and as we do that, we can't do it alone, and we have certain expectations for ourselves in stewardship. So next slide. These expectations and goals that we've set for ourselves are targeted across all business units. In early 2020, just before the pandemic actually hit, Niagara Parks Commission approved the Environmental Stewardship Action Plan. This plan was developed with one of our key partners, Brock University's through an Excellence in Environmental Stewardship initiative. Through this plan, we've set targets to actions with 4 goals: to be strategically incorporate environmental stewardship through environmental management activities, operations, and events; to foster environmental stewardship, which enriches visitor experience, promotes awareness, and encourages appreciation; to develop expertise and capacity, to be an international leader in environmental stewardship; and then to monitor and evaluate these stewardship efforts to make sure that we are being successful in meeting those goals. So one of the tools that we've developed for that, on the next slide, please, is the urban forestry management strategy. So this strategy applies to all of our lands. It's not just a forest canopy. It also applies to the lands along the shoreline. So it's not simply what you would think of as a woodlot. It's everywhere where we're having our trees growing. So as many of you may be aware, there's been significant loss of trees due to invasive species, the emerald ash borer. And this plan will help make Niagara Parks more resilient towards these things. We have goals of maintaining and increasing the canopy cover to 35%. It's presently about 28%. And to have the shoreline be 75% vegetation with native vegetation. We want to increase the species and habitat diversity within the parks as well, and increase awareness and promote stewardship, amongst others. So on the next slide, the way we were doing this promotion is that, and with these goals, we can't just do this alone. We have to work in collaboration with many other groups. One key partner for Niagara Parks along the river has been the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan. So for those who may not be aware, in response to the environmental degradation around the Great Lakes Basin, the United States and Canada came together to sign the Canada-US Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement in the early 1970s. This agreement commits both countries to work to restore and maintain the chemical, physical, and biological integrity of the Great Lakes system. So within that, they identified sites within the Great Lakes Basin that were particular areas of concern. And unfortunately, the Niagara River was identified as one of those spaces that, due to its contamination and degradation of habitat. So the Niagara River Remedial Action Plan is a community-led group. It really is based on initiatives that are supported by many different government and non-governmental organizations, First Nations communities, industries and scientists, and interested citizens. These goals to improve our environment and be stewards can't be just done by one group. They have to be done in partnership. And one of the main, most recent initiatives that Niagara Parks has undertaken is the Niagara River Coastal Wetland Restoration Project. So this is due to declining fish populations, specifically top predator species, walleye, yellow perch, northern pike. They're largely attributed to the loss of nearshore aquatic nursery habitat that are known as coastal wetlands. It's estimated that over 75% of the historic coastal wetlands on the Canadian side of the river had been lost due to shoreline hardening and other land uses. So that's when, armor stone or other hard surfaces have gone along the shoreline. So as a result of this program, there were 7 sites selected on the upper Niagara River, as well as several on the United States side of the river that were identified as perfect for habitat restoration. So over the last few years, Niagara Parks, in collaboration with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, we've been restoring these sites, including Gonder's Flats, which Corey will give you some more details about recently. And so, as I keep mentioning, Gonder's Flats Restoration Project is supported in many other initiatives along the river, are supported by many partners, including the ones that you see here. So these are, as I said, they're governmental organizations, they're community groups, they're made up of volunteers or people that have an interest in the environment. And so now Corey is going to go into more detail specific to how these stewardship goals and our plans are being reflected in the work that has taken place in Gonder's Flats and what our future plans there will be.
Thank you, Ellen. So as Steve mentioned, so this is for a bit of context. Hopefully everybody can hear me. So Gonder's Flats, just north of Town Line Road, across from Service Road 7. It's about a 16-hectare site. It has a long history. So Gonder's Flats, the name, it came from the previous owners of the land. They had the land from about 1799 to just the Great Depression era, in the 1930s, which was handed over to Niagara Parks for the building of the parkway. Since then, majority of the land has undergone several levels of maintenance. It became parkland, but given the wet soils, it's always been a challenge. Starting in 1998, the site was actually identified as a suitable wetland restoration site or wetland enhancement site, because really the site is a wetland based on the soils and the topography and the plant life there. So when they were planning to twin the Peace Bridge in Fort Erie, they actually identified this site as a good offsetting site. It wasn't until about 2014 when Niagara Parks really started getting into the restoration. So I'll go over that a bit now. So firstly, the current use of the site. So it's a popular site for walking, fishing, shoreline fishing, birding. There's some excellent bird species that come to the site. We do have picnic tables, so picnicking, and also a lot of cyclists use the site as a staging area to go onto the Niagara River Recreation Trail. It has significant ecological resources here. So there is species at risk in the area. It's one of the only real true wetland areas on the parkway or along the river, the Niagara or the Canadian side, sorry. It has actually true marsh habitat. There is presence of wetland indicator species. Again, is identified as a high priority for fish habitat, potentially muskie and sturgeon. It has the ability to filter off runoff from the road, nearby drainage ditches, and mitigates flooding. So currently, there is some challenge with the site. So I mentioned it's about a 16-hectare or 6.5 hectare site, 16 acres, very low-lying area. Most of the year it has standing water. The soils are pretty much wet all year round. At one time, it would dry up slightly or it'd freeze, and that's been an ongoing challenge. Unfortunately, invasive species have been taken over. So anybody who lives in this area might have seen this tall grass, Phragmites. That's one we want to target. And then, but there is the presence of these wetland indicator and tolerant species, which does kind of give you the idea that this should be a wetland. So again, management challenges, the perpetually wet soils makes it almost impossible to do any kind of mowing or maintenance of the site. I'll go into a bit more detail, but just the tree work there it was a 5-year, we were waiting almost 5 years to get to that point, to be able to do that. Had to wait on the surface conditions. So again, we're seeing invasive species, emerald ash borer. It was an insect that decimated the area. So most of the tree canopy in this area was ash. And that particular species targeted that species and had about 100% mortality rate. Again, this Phragmites is another one that likes to have wet soils, and it's targeting this site very well. And it's also species at risk habitat. So there is a lot of restrictions on what we can do on this property. We do have to keep it natural, and we can't just clear it. So in 2014, we started doing active restoration. Started off, there's an old service road that was actually eroding into the river, which was seen as a significant problem to fish habitat and in safety. There's also a parking lot where it was kind of drew people in to illegal dumping and unwanted behaviors. So we took that opportunity. We knew people still like to walk in the site. So we took out the asphalt road and parking lot and put in a footpath. We also did quite a bit of shoreline erosion mitigation. So we used, again, try to soften it a bit using logs and the smaller riprap, not large armor stone. And we also did significant tree planting. Several hundred trees were planted in shrubs just to increase that biodiversity moving forward. As we knew at the time, emerald ash borer was going to have a huge impact in this area. So we wanted to make sure we had something getting established at that time. Moving to, so Alan mentioned the coastal wetland project. So Gonder's Flats was seen as a prime example. So it was actually one of only 2 sites that wasn't by a river or one of the creeks that flow into the river, but it's the low-lying near shore habitat that was identified as being optimal. So again, it's all in water works. So the idea is that we anchor in trees and with rocks, large rocks, away from the shoreline, and it slows down the water action. It allows soils or the sediments to settle to the bottom, and even seed, so aquatic plants will establish along the shoreline. So again, it was a bit of an opportunity for Niagara Parks because we had all these ash trees that had to come down, and so we were able to anchor about 95 of these trees into the river, creating fish habitat. In addition, we underneath these trees was also Christmas trees that were recycled as well. And there's about 300 to 400 tons of stone that was used to anchor all this. So it kind of creates initial fish habitat cover, and also then long term, it creates areas for vegetation to establish. Again, optimal nursery habitat. That's kind of what it looked like today. So soon after. So what we wanted to see is the shoreline vegetation taking hold and establishing. We know fishermen love to be in these areas. We're seeing more shorebirds along this area as well, terns as well, which is great news. So we know it's working. We plan to do the ongoing monitoring to see the fish populations increase. And we also had opportunity as part of the Ontario 150 anniversary to install a series of pollinator gardens at the parks. So we targeted Gonder's Flats as one of these small project areas, and it established quite well, and it's supporting numerous pollinator insects, butterflies, and such as bees as well. So we do have educational signage as well, and again, this project overall will build on that. As many of you have driven by the area probably noticed, we have been removing the ash trees. So the Niagara Parks' forestry team has removed about 250 ash trees in this area. There is still some woody debris on the ground that has to be removed. Again, the wet soil conditions is always a challenge. So there's about a 5-year window before we can get to this point. And we finally got in there, but the window closed pretty fast due to the wet soils. We're not seeing the ground freeze like it used to, and it's been a challenge for us. So that's why moving to where we are today, this is where we see this as the best opportunity to really target the enhancement of this area to be a fully functional wetland habitat. Like I just mentioned, the objectives. So we do want to restore and enhance the functional wetland habitat. It is basically a wetland habitat already, just not very functional, and it allows to have the other areas to be more maintained as well. We do want to provide environmental educational opportunities. Like most things we do, we want to incorporate that into our programming, educational signage, get a real appreciation to what these areas provide and why they're there. Protect the sensitive habitats and species from invasive species. So really target these invasive species and even future invasive species, as like Phragmites. And we want to expand accessible and passive recreational opportunities. So again, the plan is long-term to make this fully accessible site. And also it provides us opportunities to some of the tools to combat climate change and be more resilient to future flooding and extreme weather events. So really the scope of this project, it is to incorporate a pond area. So it won't require much excavation, to be honest. The water table is really high here. But then with the soil removed, we will create some berms. It won't be too drastic. Again, we recognize we don't want a significant impact from the parkway, but there will be a bit higher areas that we can maintain a bit better, and we planted with lower growing vegetation. Any invasive species will be managed. We do like to incorporate wildlife habitat structures. So we have the bird boxes, we have mallard structures as well. These are from our Legend site, but we'd like to expand on that as well. And again, this is one of these opportunities that we'd like to hear, is there certain habitats that we want to, structures we want to create here. And we do want to incorporate interpretive signage on the site. There's a lot of opportunities, not just environmental, but even cultural. There's a long history of this property, which would be great to expand on. So this is kind of what we're looking at. So this is the concept. So all the in-water work has already been done. So that's what we did with the coastal wetland project. So we're looking at just on the upland side of things now. So where you see that blue kind of blob, that's the pond area, fairly shallow, a couple of deeper pools. It'll be all planted around with wetland vegetation. There'll be some berms. We'll create a bit of lookout points that we thought would be ideal for bird viewing and just overviewing the wetland in general. We did a bit of a trail system, so it'll be a bit more of a loop system. And we'll look at some other opportunities further down the road. Initial phase though will be really the wetland, the excavation and the berms with some trail work. So it's kind of example. This was done in West Lincoln in 2012. In just over a year, it was established quite nicely. It's a Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority project. It just shows how fast, when the site is suitable, how fast it will take hold. So we see the benefit. There's many benefits of this project. So some flood retention allows us to manage the invasive species better. Again, enhanced recreational opportunities. So we'll have a trail system in there. It'll benefit obviously the wildlife. Improve aesthetics of the views of the river. So again, we'll be removing the invasive species, which is right now is kind of creating a barrier to the shoreline and the view of the river. It'll enable us to actually properly manage the surrounding areas as well. So again, right now you see a lot of vegetation that's there now is invasive. So again, a lot of it have come down. It'd be managed long-term. Any features wouldn't be above the parkway level. So it'd be fairly modest changes there. And we'd stick to lower growing shrubs and vegetation. It also allows us to increase our West Nile monitoring. We have a program in place for the last several decades, or last couple of decades, I would say. So we monitor the sites. Any standing water does get monitored and tested, and there's an abatement program in place for that. And there is no impacts to surrounding the zoning or the property values or anything. There's no additional species at risk, and there's no change in land use designation. So it wouldn't be any further restrictions than we already have now with their current species at risk on the site. So it's not there's several phases to this project. So phase one, we did start this in 2018. So we did an archaeological assessment. We had a concept design established, which you saw. Phase 2 is now where we're at. So we're working with our partners to get some funding in place. We want to do the public consultation, and that's why we have lots of opportunity to comment on this process. And then our phase 3 will be likely early in the new year. Update the construction design, be kind of shovel ready, and actually do construction. And also what's next, so we are looking forward. So we want to upgrade the existing trail system. We want to look at making it fully accessible. We'll see opportunities for boardwalks and lookout points, additional signage, additional nesting structures, ongoing monitoring opportunities. So we are, anytime we do a project, we try to build in a monitoring program and evaluation so we can adapt the project as needed. But we'll also be looking for help if anybody's interested in participating in the citizen science piece of that. So look at the bird species, the vegetation success, amphibians, so marsh monitoring, and so lots of opportunities there for that. All right.
Forgot to unmute myself there. Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Ellen, for the presentation. So again, we did want to allow some time for questions to come in. So I'll do my best to direct these questions. So our first question is actually, I'm going to give this one to Corey. Question is there any consideration for connecting the pond to the main river?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the original concept does have it connected. So it is something we'd like to do, because then we can see it being more beneficial for fish habitat. Just got to balance, there might be some issues with thermal pollution. So you're heating up the water and releasing it back to the river. Given the size of the river and the size of this pond, it's fairly small. So we think it will be doable to connect it, at least in high water levels. So we're planning for.
Okay, thank you, Corey. So again, if you've got an opportunity and you want to think about the presentation, you can certainly download it from the website. There will be a survey emailed to everybody who registered, and that survey provides you an opportunity to submit a variety of questions or comments, and certainly we will be posting all the summary at the end of the comment period in January. So our next question, maybe I'll give this one to Corey as well. So the question is, ospreys have been observed during the last 3 or more years on this property. Are you considering the construction of osprey nesting platforms?
Yeah, we have looked at the site. We did target the site as a potential nesting platform location. We do know they're nesting in the area as well. So it'd be probably a future stage. But yeah, it'd be an excellent site for it.
Okay. So Ellen's question will be for you. Have you met any resistance from residents who are now enjoying the new view of the river? Berms and tree plantings may change this.
Well, we haven't met any resistance in the other areas where we've been doing the shoreline restoration work, primarily because the type of planting that we're doing and what would be proposed here at Gonder's Flats will actually maintain views better than the invasive plants that have been growing along the shoreline. So right now we're seeing a lot of buckthorn or in this area like the Phragmites, and just a lot of the invasive materials actually grow taller and are very dense, far more than you would have if we just had what would normally in the past have been the native vegetation there. So we're going to be targeting species that are native, but they're going to be usually lower growing. They're going to be able to maintain those views. So well, we don't anticipate there being any impacts to the views here either.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Next question is for Corey. How deep do you anticipate the pond to be? And are there any liability considerations as pedestrians and children will have access?
Yeah, so I think right now we're looking probably up to 1 to 1.5 meters. Again, we're still looking at final designs. we are surrounded by water as well, so we do know like it's always a challenge and liability. We will have signage. The access points will be fairly defined and above the water level, so we do hope that will mitigate that. But it is something we'll be addressing probably through multiple means of either signage and education.
And if I could add, like, this is part of why we really like to see the boardwalks as well. So the boardwalks will help define and sort of keep most visitors well away from the water's edge.
And I'm wondering, Corey, if you could just comment on sort of the grading or the slope, the design of the pond, that may help too.
Yeah, it is a quite gradual slope being proposed. And there's only a couple little deeper areas, but again, overall, it's going to be a slight change overall.
Okay, thank you. The next question, I think I'll give this one to Corey, is, are all the ash trees being removed or being reused as structure in the pond and berms?
Great question. We are going to be using some of the woody debris on site as well. For the most part, we've been able to recycle almost every ash tree that we've cut down in the park, either through fish habitat or for mulch for our plantings. We will be keeping some for habitat structures as well in the ponds. Yep.
Okay, the next question here, I will, maybe I'll take this one myself here. The question is, will skating be allowed on the pond in the winter? So that's a great question. We do get a lot of requests for skating or other types of winter recreational activities, and it's something that we do want to support. I would say historically and in most areas, natural ponds are a high risk for skating. We're not intending to fence this pond off, but normally just the variability of weather and the potential that the pond ice will be very thin, we may end up having to do some regulatory signage. But it's a great point, and I'm glad the question was asked, because we'll certainly take that into our consideration when we're going through the design process. Okay, the next question for Corey. Is there a list of trees and plant species being used?
We don't have the plant list finalized yet. It is something that we can make available when the time comes. Again, it'll probably be mostly shrub and wetland growing species. The trees there have taken a huge beating due to the wet soil conditions. So we probably, again, to this next point too, is that it'll be mostly lower growing vegetation, native shrubs and aquatic plants.
Okay. Next question for Corey. So views have been obstructed over the last few years. And I guess the question is, will you be doing reforestation or solely wetland and native species of wetland plants? Just trying to understand the view issue.
Yeah, so we likely won't be planting, it won't be a reforestation project by any means. There is some native trees there that will remain intact. There's some several large maples, but most of the trees that are there now are actually European alders and buckthorn. So all those are coming down. We will be sticking to probably low growing shrubs is our goal in wetland plants.
Okay, thanks, Corey. Okay, this one's a bit of a longer note. I'm going to try and distill this down a little bit. So I guess the general comment is the wonderful project. We have been in the area for many years and appreciate the care that Niagara Parks has given to the land and the river shoreline. I guess there is a dock upstream of the project site, and there's quite a bit of erosion going on at that locations. It's threatening some of the larger shoreline trees. Do you have any plans to address this erosion?
So I can take that one. So I am familiar with that site, and we don't have any immediate plans, but we are, through this project, we do hope to address some of these shoreline erosion problems nearby. But yes, it's that was a bit of a challenge too, the way it drops pretty significantly. So it'll take a bit of work on that one.
So this is maybe sort of a similar question, Corey. As part of this project, do you anticipate requiring the removal of any existing dock sites in the area?
No, it doesn't affect any of those sites. Even we avoid any kind of shore wells or anything like that as well.
Okay. So again, certainly if you have some questions, please feel free to submit them, or you can wait and do them online through the web portal. And we're going to have a copy of the presentation, the PDF of the slide deck that we went through, as well as a recording of this presentation with the Q&A captured as well. So feel free to share that with your friends, or maybe when you're looking for some entertainment over the Christmas break, you can revisit the pictures here. So I'm not seeing any other questions. Again, I want to thank everybody for participating tonight. So again, just as a recap, the web survey will be emailed out to everybody who registered. And if you wish to take the survey and you did not register, the link will be live on the project webpage, which is niagaraparks.com/Gonders Flats, all one word. And you'll find more information on there. As of the new year, January 4th, we'll certainly post all the questions and the summary results of the survey. Okay, and just looking to see if there's any other comments. No other questions. I think I appreciate everybody's time and input tonight, and we certainly look forward to moving this project forward. So I think with that, again, I want to thank everybody, and we'll call it an evening and let you all get back to, I'm sure, your busy schedules.
Thank you.
Yep.